Okay. Everybody ready? Get going here. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you had a great weekend. My name is Michael Markowsky, and I'm going to be your photography instructor for the next hour. And then after then, there's going to be some time for some questions, if you have any. And I'm going to look at some of your photos. So if you have any photos that you want some feedback, send them to me right now through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and just also type in the notes here on the video where you sent them to so that I can find them as quickly as possible. And it's a great way for you just to kind of get a little bit more, maybe you're struggling in a certain area of photography and you can't figure out what's wrong with your photos. The focus seems to be a little off or maybe a little bit blurry. What's going on? So even if your photos aren't fantastic, you could send them to me and I don't even have to know your name, or we can keep it kind of as anonymous as possible, and that way I can kind of help sort out some of the problems you might have, because as great as it is to show your very best photographs, I think we often learn from those where there's some problems, right, to put it kindly. Okay, so over the past 8 classes, this is class number 9, we've been exploring how to use the camera in greater and greater and greater detail. And we started out at the very beginning with just sort of learning basic composition and how to frame a photograph, how to kind of take even your iPhone photos up another level just by using some basic principles of composition. We talked about the golden triangle, or the golden ratio, and the rule of thirds, and then I showed you how to take photographs in automatic and how to find all of the shutter speed, ISO, and aperture, and then replicate that in the manual manual mode, and adjust all the settings to make those pictures happen. All right, and that should always be your bit of a fallback. So if anything, if you're still struggling with something and just getting your camera into the zone just seems a little bit tricky, don't feel like it's not cheating to use that little technique I showed you. That was how I originally, when I started using my DSLR, that was a technique that I used, and that really helped me learn to use my camera a little bit better, because it would kind of tell me what the camera thought was a good photograph. So then anyway, then we talked about using the exposure meter, and then using the exposure meter that was kind of going up and down or side to side depending on your camera, and was telling you whether it was too bright or too dark. We could then, in the manual mode, refine the different settings to get the exposure meter towards 0. And as we learned, often, I would say for me, most of the time, the photos I like aren't near 0, or they're near-ish 0, but they're not right on the line. Often there may be a little bit, well, I usually like my photos a little bit on the darker side, a little bit underexposed, because then on the computer I can brighten the photograph up later on. And whereas if I take a bright photograph, it's really hard to recover some of that detail and to darken it, I guess you could say. So we learned all of those things. Then we started kind of going into fine detail, learning a little bit more about ISO. We spent 2 classes talking about aperture. And then the past 2 classes we've spent really focusing on shutter speed. And we're going to do a little bit more of that today. And then just sort of kind of transition into taking photographs in situations that are probably quite common to you. If you're watching this video, most of the people that I encounter on the first day of class, I'd say 70% of people want to be able to take pictures of animals, their own pets in their house, or they go on a vacation and they want to be able to take pictures of the native animals, you know, in parks and safaris, or you go on a hike somewhere and you want to be able to take pictures of birds or deer, bears, hopefully not too many of those. So thinking about how to take pictures of those animals. And then, so we're going to talk about that. And I think this is where everything starts to kind of come full circle, where we start kind of applying all of the principles together here to take great photographs. So, and then we're also going to talk a little bit about using lights. So I've got some very simple, cheap lights, not $2,000 big strobe lights that you might see in a photographer's studio, but stuff that you can go down to your hardware store or local department store and get. I do have a few that are slightly more expensive and you can order offline, but they're, you know, 25 bucks. That's what I mean by slightly more expensive, because I think having some lights will really kind of up your photography game as well. Because I think some of the things we've talked about in how to really take your, if you're really interested in getting in photography, I made a little list a while ago, and the top thing I put on there was to get or try a 50mm lens for your camera. So having an extra lens that we call a prime lens, and I think so on this camera here I've got a 56mm lens, and actually, well, I don't even know if I want to get into, well, yeah, I'm not even going to go into, but, so anyway, it's a 56mm lens, and we would call this like a portrait lens, or people would say nifty 50, and it has a very low aperture. So let me see, let's just kind of quickly, maybe I can can I zoom in any more on that? So this, I guess, let me get a little closer. You can see 56, and then this is the Fuji camera, and on the Fuji camera we have the aperture ring right on the lens itself. A lot of you, if you have a Canon, which I have a Canon here, and a Nikon as well, to adjust your aperture, you would usually use one of the dials on the front and back, right, which you can generally customize depending on the make and model of your camera. So what makes this, you know, f1.2 aperture on this camera so fantastic is that it can really take beautiful portrait photographs because the background will be blurry, right? So literally the only thing that's in focus is a person's face, right, which focuses the viewer's attention on your photographs or your film or video that you're making as well, because all of these principles apply to filmmaking, video creation as well. Okay, so so I say get a 50mm lens, get a tripod would be the next thing, and we talked about tripods a few weeks ago, because even if you have just a cheap little tripod, you know, you find these things at like discount department stores. I'm sure, well, here in Canada we have places called like Winners and Home Sense, and they often have little things like this, but I'm sure Walmart or Target or anything else like that. I don't know, it might be a little bit more for the dollar store, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those ones that are like $1 and up stores would have something like that. But that will allow you to take some long exposures, right, where the shutter speed is slower, like we talked about last week with, and then we can start taking photographs in the middle of the night of stars and the moon and all that kind of stuff, right? So a tripod is super essential. And I also talked about suggesting having an extra battery and even an extra SD card. All right, so the SD cards that go into your camera, right? So I have a little case that I carry around with so this here has got a bunch of little cards, and I've actually got, well, I've got 4 different cameras in here with a different and one in the computer as well. So something like this is watertight, right? So if my backpack with all my camera equipment fell into a lake or into a pool while I was shooting, maybe all of my camera gear would be ruined, which would be awful. But let's say I was at a wedding, and this was at the very end of the wedding, and a guest pushed me into the fountain or something. At the very least, I'd be able to recover the photographs that I shot earlier that day. And also just a little quick tip here. This is kind of a newer case. One of the things that, if you do have a case for your SD cards, what I usually do is, if I have a new card, they're facing out like this, and then when I've used them, you just put them in backwards, right? So that reminds me, so that if it's dark and I'm in a venue and it's hard to see, at the very, it's much easier to see those kind of the other side of the card, so I can pull that out and use that quickly. Okay, so batteries, tripod, lens, and we talked about you can rent lenses rather than just going out and buying a lens. Most people, another way that you can kind of get a little bit of the experience of using a 50mm lens is, most of you probably are using what they call the kit lens that comes with your camera, and that's usually an 18 to 55mm lens, right? A zoom lens. And what you can do is just try going around with your camera zoomed out the whole time. So you go on a walk, instead of zooming in and out to frame a picture, just keep it all the way zoomed in on something, right? So it looks like you're closer to something, and just so don't touch that at all, then just try taking photographs. It'll give you some feeling of what it's like to use like a 50mm lens, a prime lens. And a prime lens is what we call a lens that does not zoom, so it's fixed focal distance, right? And it'll give you some of the, because that will really force you to use your legs to zoom and to walk around to take photographs, rather than relying on the zoom to do a lot of the work for you. Now, I'll just say really quickly, there is some, so-called serious photographers traditionally have used primarily prime lenses that do not zoom. So, and that was the case up until relatively recently, because zoom lenses have tended to be, they have great flexibility. Like, you can zoom in on something all the way across the other side of a football field and get right up close to a bird. But traditionally, they've had problems with maybe being slightly soft, like the focus being soft, like you just can't quite get it nice and sharp, and sometimes a little bit of what do we call that? Just word escaped me, but a little bit of darkening around the edges and in the corners, and sometimes also maybe the front is in focus, or the center is in focus, but the edges being a little bit soft as well. So traditionally, if you wanted really good, nice, sharp photographs without any of that whatever on the outside, you'd want to get a prime lens. Now, they do make really, really high-end zoom that in some cases even outperform the prime lenses, but those can be very expensive. Like, we're talking at least $1,000 going up to like $4,000-$5,000 for a lens. Like, so that also brings me to another point, which is that you should think about, you know, I'm trying to remember, there was there's a saying in photography that well, I can't remember, but I can't remember the exact saying. So, but it's just that you kind of grow with the lenses, and the bodies you kind of switch in and out. So most of us, you know, we buy a camera and we really treat the camera very preciously, and the lens is it's not like we throw it down the street, and we don't give it any care, but we kind of think of it as an afterthought, which actually the lens on your camera, as you get into photography, often becomes more important than the body of the camera itself. And that as time goes on, you'll think about upgrading the body of your camera. And if you get into a particular system, so this is why, like, camera companies, they have these kind of different steps of makes and models of cameras. They'll start out with your cheap, $200 very basic camera, and then they kind of keep building up in price till you get up to like a $2,000 body only camera, and then so that they can kind of hook you like some kind of drug dealer or something. So they'll hook you with the cheap camera, and you start buying lenses, and then you start, well, okay, now I need a better camera to use all this nice glass, as often people refer to a lens as glass. So so having a prime lens is generally how you're going to really improve your photography, but using a zoom, if you spend the money, you can get a really, really nice zoom that can kind of make up. And anyway, so we've talked about those tips, and all of that is kind of comes into big time play when we're talking about taking pictures of animals, because animals, by their very nature, are not particularly cooperative subjects, right? They generally, when they see people, they want to get out of there, right? They don't want to stick around and wait and see if they get eaten, right? So whenever they see people, they're usually pretty leery of people. So we want to use kind of certain kind of settings to help us capture them in their natural habitat. And maybe that even just means your cat in your living room, right? So how would we do that, right? So which camera? I'll use this Canon here. So if we want to take photographs of, and I'm going to actually show you a whole bunch of photographs today. I'm going to kind of go through some recent photographs that I've taken of some birds and some deer, and you'll kind of see some, I'm actually going to show you some of the raw images as well, so that you can see which ones that I decided were the better ones, and you'll also kind of get an idea of how tricky it can be. And I'm not going to show you all of them, but let's say, for instance, let's go right to this right now, maybe, because yeah, and I'll explain some photo settings here as we go. So, oops, let's go to the okay. Okay, so I wonder if I want to start with eagles here. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to start with this big batch of photographs. And I'm going to bring them up on the screen here. So 1 second, once they all load in. And okay. So up here on the screen that you see right now are, this is in Haida Gwaii, up in the Queen Charlotte Islands. And this is, you know, I'm trying to remember the name. And I'm literally showing you all the photos. So here's different, you know, as we go through here, here's some landscape format versus a portrait format of the same image, right? So I think this is Toe Hill in Haida Gwaii. I think that's what it was called. And there's kind of a beautiful walk where you can walk around and go all the way up. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but kind of where my video screen is right now is a big hill that is shrouded in mist, and you'll see photographs of it shortly here. But anyway, we went, you can walk up to the hill, and then you can walk down onto the beach, and there's people surfing. It's pretty cold up there. I mean, we're almost up at Alaska by that point. But on the way back, kind of as we're about to get back in the car, my father-in-law spotted this deer in the forest. And you probably can't see it here, but I can see it now because I was there. And it's like, oh, because he knew I had a big lens on my camera that could, so I actually was using a zoom lens, or I had it in my backpack. I think in this photograph, I hadn't brought it out yet, but I think this is one of them, right? So you can see here's this deer in the grass. And at this point, I'm kind of standing on that wooden boardwalk that you saw earlier, trying to take some photographs, and don't know how long that deer is going to be there for, right? So one thing about taking pictures of animals is don't be afraid to take lots of pictures, because you don't know which ones are really going to turn out, and you're in a kind of a hurried situation. So you know that you kind of, as I know there are some people out there who claim to be able to go out, you know, and take 5 photographs of an event or whatever that are spectacular, but I highly doubt that they're being totally honest with you. So the first few are just short. When I'm taking those photographs, you know, I put the lens on, so I'm taking my camera, take the lens off, I have my backpack, put a new lens on, and then I quickly bring the camera around, I take a photograph and see what the exposure is, right? I'm like, okay, we've got to get brighter, darker, okay. So then the first things that go into my mind when I'm in that situation are, what should my settings be? Now, in this situation, we're talking about it's probably, you know, let's see if I can bring up the time of day here. You know, so this is almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it is a really, really bright day. So you can also see here on my settings, this is 1/3200th of a second. So 1/3200th of a second, right? So a relatively fast shutter speed. And my aperture, my f number is 2, right? So even though I'm zoomed in, you can still see there's a relative amount of depth here, right? So we're talking like probably 40 feet here, which is what, like 10 meter or 10 or 20 meters or something. I don't know, somewhere in there. So this background is blurry. Even some of these big sticks and rocks, or these aren't sticks, they're tree trunks, and then the grass in front of me is blurry, right? So my f2 and my ISO is 160. So my camera is at its pretty much lowest ISO possible, right? It's very bright, so I don't need any help from the camera to brighten it up, and I want my photos to be as sharp as possible. So using a low ISO setting, if you can, in this situation, in a bright day, f number 2, just because I want to isolate this animal a little bit from the background, right? I'm just going to close this because I don't want, if everything was in focus, you know, if this was f/22 and I was able to see the leaves on the tree in the back here and the people walking on the beach and the surfers here and all of these rocks and the tree trunks, and then we also have the sorry, somebody's trying to call me on my so, and then we have all of this grass in the foreground. If all of that is in sharp focus, it's not so clear to the viewer as to what is the central image that I am trying to direct them to look at in the photograph, because everything's in focus, so people are going to kind of be looking around, and as obvious as this deer might be in this photograph, if it was all in focus, you might look at it for, you know, maybe 5-6 seconds and then go, oh, there's a deer there, I didn't even see that. Which, you know, I have a few photographs where the deer is kind of almost completely hidden and you just see its ears poking out. So that would be maybe an interesting photograph. It's like, you know, a Where's Waldo kind of situation, but using a shallow depth of field. And I think this is probably one of my the favorite photos, because at this point, you know, I had taken a number of other images kind of from a little bit above, and they were like, okay, they were kind of more like vacation snapshots where it's like, oh, that's, you know, here's a deer. But then I thought, okay, well, before we go, why don't I just there were a few steps there. I came down these steps onto the beach to get a little bit closer to it, because I figure if it runs, I've already got a few photographs, of which you've already seen. I don't know if they're spectacular or not, but maybe I could zoom in and crop a little bit. So at this point I figure, okay, well, let's just get up a little bit closer. And you can see it obviously turns to look at me and is wondering, hey, I wonder how far you're going to come here, right? How sharp are your teeth? And so, again, what I'm also doing in this situation is I'm zooming in, and I focus using autofocus on this deer. So on my camera, I would sort of basically it would look kind of like this through my viewfinder. I would zoom right in on it. And if my focus point is in the center, right, I could lock the focus. So I could even take a picture of it, right, in auto focus, take a picture, right, and then I switch my camera to manual focus, right, because now the camera is focused and even maybe taken a photograph, and now I can switch it to manual focus. And this means as long as this animal is kind of staying in, it's kind of walking parallel or perpendicular to my camera, right? So like this here, if it's moving side to side, right, just like I am right now, my camera is in manual focus, right? So if I'm walking back and forth this way, I'm always going to be in focus. It's once I start kind of stepping backwards or coming forwards where I might lose focus. But if I'm still in auto, but right now, you know, so this deer is kind of not running or anything. It's just kind of staring at me. So this allows me to fire lots of photographs really quickly because the camera doesn't have to make any adjustments, right? So, and then I think it looked like it was going to run away. Oh, okay, so it is gone. Okay. Let me see. Are there any more in this set? So you can see this is now focused on the background here. I thought, well, the deer's run away. Maybe there's some landscape images I can take. And, you know, I like what's happening here. There's a lot of atmosphere, probably spray from the water that's coming up into the atmosphere, into the air. And so we get these kind of, on this side, it's a little bit disguised by my picture-in-picture there, but this area here is a little bit darker, and we have these dark rocks here. And then as we go here, just notice how kind of faint things become. All right, I think this is on the walk back. So here's me also trying to take some photographs of some other birds in here. And I think at this point I'm slow. It's darker. I'm now in the forest, so I've had to slow the shutter speed down a little bit. But what I do like about this is, and if I recall, I was also trying this purposefully, is to have a slow enough shutter speed so I start getting some blur in the wings. You know, here's, I don't know. Okay, so here, well, let's talk about a few things here. So I think this is a raven, right? I'm not an ornithologist in any way. I don't know my birds as probably as well as I should, but so I was trying to photograph this, and one thing that I don't like about this is to see his face is kind of, it's against this dark background. So one of the things that I'm often doing if I'm looking at that bird, and if it's relatively stationary, I'm going kind of up and down and seeing if I move my camera to reposition it so that, like, something closer to this, right? Where now its beak is in front of this brighter part of this tree in the background, so that it can highlight it. Because again, this here, as nice as it is, it kind of, its head disappears a little bit. So I'm looking for those moments. Even as I kind of, one thing I like about this photograph is we can see its mouth open on here. Now it's fairly subtle, but you know, if I wanted, I could crop this photograph in just to kind of, you know, so anyway, let me zoom out. And you know, so let me see, I'm just how can I, so here's this raven flying away, and obviously it's a blurry photograph, but I'm also not super unhappy with it. Like, as much as it's, actually, because we're going to talk a little bit about doing some of this panning stuff in today's class too. So this is also on a slower shutter speed, and I'm trying to capture the movement of that bird. Is this going to, okay. And I'm pan the camera kind of quickly, so I get a little bit, it's not perfectly, it's not anywhere near nice focus or perfectly sharp, but there is a sense of movement and action in the picture. And I always just want to remind people that focus is not always the most important thing, right? So let me see, I'm gonna, so here's another example where this is, the bird is in a really dark environment, and I want to be able to, but outside here is really, really bright. So I was trying to get, I want this to be well exposed, but the background is totally overexposed. Now I don't entirely, it doesn't bother me entirely, but probably not a usable image. And then here's some, I think those previous photographs of the deer were taken from somewhere over here. And then we walked up to the top of the hill and then came back down. And now we're just sort of looking at, this is my father-in-law picking, there's all sorts of shells and just this beautiful kind of mist shrouding the top of that hill. And they're looking at things, this eagle flying over. And so now I'm trying to track this bird that is flying in this way. So again, I can zoom in and take a quick photograph of it, and then as I'm kind of panning, it's staying in relatively, it's kind of going along the length of the beach. I can kind of get a number of photographs, and now I'm going and let's see, you know, it's further enough away. I can't remember what lens I was using for this here. This is my 90mm lens. Okay. I was going to show you a few things off of here. Oh. Okay. Well, cameras are So I'm also just, these are just the raw photographs from our trip, but some of these, I was just kind of really intrigued by these colors of, I don't know what, the seaweed, plankton, I don't know, goo. And so this is, you know, super shallow water, you know, not even enough to go over the tops of your toes. And I'm just sort of looking down at it, and kind of the tide coming in and these bubbles. And so this is in getting these beautiful reflections. You look a little bit silly when you're taking photographs like that, but you know, my wife, I don't think it's in this batch, is getting some printed because she liked some of the photos I took like that, I think at a different beach. And then, you know, I love picking things up on the beach, and I could spend hours doing it. But my wife hates it when I have pockets full of shells and rocks and crabs and all these kind of things that I like to bring home. So one thing you can do is take a picture of it. And I think in here, so here's a kind of a cool rock. I think I managed to smuggle that one home. But here's like a crab shell, and just kind of holding it up and taking a photograph of it, and you know, trying to get some of the background even in there, you know, cutting my fingers out. So this is a way, and so here's another few things here. This is my collection, and then I'm rearranging it a little bit. You know, maybe I can make a cool little composition. And then these are some of the trees up there. And you know what I think is important to kind of come out of this is you can see the sky in the background is overexposed. It's really, really bright. Again, middle of the day. But inside of this forest, it's quite dark, and you can see how dense the vegetation is with these big clumps on the trees. So I was originally standing there trying to take these photographs, and then I realized all of this sky is going to be blown out. So instead of trying to get any sky, I'm going to see, is there a way to take these photographs without seeing the sky at all? And so here's one of the photos that I created because there's barely any sky in here poking through. And not that you should avoid it, but I wanted to capture the denseness of this forest, and it sort of makes sense that there's less sky there, that you can't see any sky kind of works for this kind of set of images. And let's just quickly take a look at some settings here. So 1/640 f2 and ISO 160, and I'm using I think this is my 90mm lens. Yeah. So 90mm. We were talking about a 55mm lens. This is a 90mm lens, and you know, this weighs probably as much as some people's cameras. And so this does not zoom either, and this is a beautiful kind of portrait lens as well. And then, you know, playing a little bit with rule of thirds here, and you can see I've deliberately decided to compose. Like I can take this photograph I could walk into this brush, out of the brush, and take a photograph of this totem pole. But I liked having some of this tree kind of in the way. Like, so here again, here's another shot with a lot of that out of the way. I've put this over onto 1/3. Now I've got this sign here that is less interesting. So here's another. I actually really like this photograph because it shows how dark it is when you're in the forest and then when you look out. So all of these trees here are obscured or silhouetted. They're both out of focus and pure black, right? So there's not really anything there, but it helps tell me where I am taking this photograph. Like, this would be a very different photograph than, you know, even if I took this, right? So this photograph now looks like maybe I'm just standing on the beach and looking at this tree on the other side, you know, as I'm walking towards it. Whereas this tells me that I'm in this forest, kind of, it's dark, looking out. And that just adds a little bit more to this story. Okay. So let me see. Let's take a look at a few more here. So again, here we are, and across this kind of short river, I see this deer. Now, the problem with this situation is in a way, there's very little depth, because this deer, is literally on the other side of the river. This forest is like a wall behind the deer, and so I'm kind of standing on a ridge, so there's not really much of a way for me to get much foreground stuff going on here. So even if I think I'm at like f2 or something, probably. Yeah, so here I'm f2, 1/400, ISO 160. And in this situation, it's like, everything is going to be in focus, even if I'm at my lowest aperture. So then the question is, how can I arrange this photograph so that I can make an interesting composition out of it? So the deer's it's moving slowly, and I'm thinking, like, how can I photograph this? So now you see me moving my camera up and down a little bit, side to side, rotating the camera from landscape into portrait mode, trying to find a better image here. So again, here I'm now moving the camera, or the deer, off to 1/3, right? And I've got this very strong horizon cutting right through. You know, I like these ones where it is looking up at me. In fact, I'm probably, as I'm taking these photographs, it's biting some grass, and then I might go like, woo, woo, or something, right? To get its attention, so it looks at me, so I can get its nice white ears looking at me. And then I think, what I'm looking here, I like these reflections in, and so yeah, here I am thinking, okay, well, this is kind of a boring situation. How can I make it more interesting? What about if I use these reflections in the water? And then I think I was like, enough reflections. I'm going to look at the water and get these beautiful stars out of the way. Just a little thing. I think here's some, I don't know what kind of plant this is, but I'm taking photographs of it kind of looking down. And then I decided to get down on one knee and take a photograph of it. And which one is better here? I think I figured generally, if there's a whole bunch of things, it's usually nice if the one closest to the center is in focus. Okay, and then here's this deer. And I think I'm driving my car, and I kind of see it, and I kind of pull off on the side of the road, and I'm photographing across the road. And just out of curiosity, what is so this is 160 f2 ISO 160. So I think this is, I probably would have gone to a faster shutter speed, but I think this is like literally grabbing the camera out, trying to take a picture, while I see it. So I should have been at a faster shutter speed, and then to do that, bumped up my ISO, but I just was in a bit of a hurry. So it's probably not super perceivable on your computer or television screen right now, but some of these parts of the body are a little bit blurry just because it's moving. So, and again, you get a few photographs, and then here's kind of the shots that I think are some of the best. So this is a little bit blurry, and you have it looking right up at me. And I might have even made a little sound just to kind of like, or hello, hello, whatever, just so it looks up and I can kind of get its eyes looking towards me. And Because as nice as it is to see an animal eating the grass, I mean, get those photographs, and then you can be in the situation where you compare. You're like, okay, which photograph do I want? You know, even here, this big blade of grass and this flower in front of its face is like distracting. So here, you know, I was even thinking about, I think maybe even using this for the thumbnail for this video, because I really like it. Even this look here. And then maybe let's take, there's a lot of these, so maybe I'm just gonna, maybe what I'll do here, I'm gonna show you I think some of the best photos from this series, and then we'll go through and we'll kind of look at all of them. So there's like 430, so we're not going to go through all of them, but we can kind of, you'll see which ones that I deemed kind of some of the better images, and then we can kind of go through and explain why I would have chosen these over some of the other ones. So again, this is up in Haida Gwaii, and there's in the village of Old Masset, which is one of the oldest indigenous villages in North America. There's a kind of there's a little beach where I don't know what the conditions are, but there's lots of eagles that congregate in that area. We definitely saw lots of dead fish around there, so I don't know if it's just from the ocean, the tide is washing up these dead fish, or if there's fishermen and women who are coming ashore and they're throwing, I don't know why, but they're all there. So this is when we pulled up, there's a little fish and chip shop nearby, and my family went in to go get food and lunch, and I was out here for like an hour furiously taking photographs, because this is like, oh, I've never been this close to, like, we're talking, I'm about as far away, how far would that be, you know, a driveway length, you know, from these beautiful birds, like the, you know, my wedding ring has an eagle on it, and we're up there with my wife, and who was pregnant with our daughter at the time. So all these things seem very significant to me, and I've been a huge eagle fan my whole life. So I'd never seen anything like this in the wild. You know, every once in a while you see one on a telephone pole. But anyway, so I saw this, about 6 different eagles feeding there, and so this is me kind of approaching it, and it looks great. One thing, this photo doesn't give me a lot of context, because I'm kind of looking down at it as I'm kind of coming down this kind of sandy beach. So the sky is, we don't see the sky at all. We just see this wall of water in behind it, which is not bad. And I do like the sparkle in the water, right? It does kind of, adds a lot of life to this picture. So I like this one, and I like its beak, and you can see it's looking right at me, or the side of its eye here. And then here's some images of the eagle flying. And let's look at that. So here, look at this shutter speed here. I'm at 1/13,000 shutter speed, right? There's probably, I'm not sure how fast, let me see even this old camera here, what the fastest shutter speed is on it. Because this is definitely getting up there in terms of, yeah, so this on my camera here is the fastest shutter speed is 1/4,000, 1/4000th of a second. So this is 3 times faster of a shutter speed than my old Canon camera could capture. So this definitely allows me to capture some nice sharp, like we can zoom in on this photograph and we can see a tremendous amount of detail. you know, some, you know, like I love, you know, we can see individual feathers, and not even just individual feathers, but the hairs in the feathers. You know, you can see the talons and all that kind of stuff. There is a little, you know, I'm sure there's probably a few professionals who will watch this and give me heck, because there's a little bit of this kind of fringing of color around here on the outer edges, but maybe that could also just be a little bit of white. You can kind of see it on some of these feathers. So, and this is using, actually, incidentally, this is using this Fuji 50 to 230 millimeter lens, which is, you know, you can see when it zooms out, it's a long lens, like 2 hand lengths wide, right? And this is actually probably one of the cheapest lenses that Fuji makes. In fact, it's not even the XF, it's the XC, which is kind of their cheaper grade of lenses. And I haven't usually been a big telephoto photographer, so I just was like, well, I think I got this for like $250. So it's like, why not get this, and then I can kind of take a whole bunch of different kinds of photographs. So again, I'm probably taking the same very fast shutter speed. So again, compared to last week's episode where we were using very slow shutter speeds, today we're talking about fast shutter speeds. So to get this photograph where everything is in nice sharp focus, right, you have to be having your fastest shutter speed to get that. And it helps that these photographs are all taken in the middle of the day, very, very bright. So I can even, with a very fast shutter speed, actually, even, what is my ISO? Like, my ISO is 500. So that's going to mean these photos are also nice and sharp. And my aperture is at like f2, I think, right? If we go back, oh, f6.7, sorry, that's right, because this lens, as you zoom in, goes to 6. So, but I'm still getting a really nice separation from the background, right? On the opposite shore there, you can't see it. So these photographs where this eagle is attacking this dead salmon, you know, like, I just think these are super beautiful, because look how fast the shutter speed is. We see it tearing off in little bits of guts and water driplets flying everywhere. So for me, that's really exciting, because we just see all of this action and the driplets of water. And again, it's kind of looking right at me while its food is right down here. And then some of the other eagles showing up to take a look and join in on the feast. So the other thing, well, this might have been the thumbnail for the video. So you see where I cropped it out. I mean, thumbnail for a video is not usually the ideal display method for a for photography, but you know, I think, you know, even then I would consider cropping this photo somewhere, possibly maybe a little bit, something like that could, well, let me see, I'll just bring this. Something like this could be a nice crop. Now, we've talked about, you know, like, some people may say, didn't you say to crop in, like, if somebody's looking this way, to kind of leave this empty space here, you know, if this is the rule of thirds, so that we can see its eyes coming in, we're looking at what it's looking at. If this was a person kind of standing, looking over their shoulder like that, it might make sense to have more, oh, sorry. If this was, oh, maybe I'll even just go to, if this was a person kind of looking over their shoulder, it might make sense for me to be like this, and so we have all this area in behind me. But an eagle is different than a person, because here its whole body is kind of facing this direction, Oh, sorry, I can get this out of the way again. So its whole body is facing away from the way its head is pointed, and its eyes are looking directly at me. And also we got this kind of beautiful water in the background. So if I was going to print this photograph, which I might still, I personally would consider this would be probably my ideal situation. You know, it would have been nice to have a little bit of the horizon in behind here if I was able to get a little bit lower, but you're not always able to do that. Okay. So you see here, dipping down again. Okay. So, oh, guess we're at 5. Well, I'm not going to show you all of the rest of these images because there's a few other things I want to get to right now. But suffice to say, I took on that, in that short frame of time, in about a span of 45 minutes or so, while, you know, food was being prepared in the restaurant, and I'm on the beach, and of course family members are like, how much longer are you going to be down here? Are you going to order? I'm like, order me anything. So while that's happening, I shot like 480 photographs in 45 minutes of those eagles, and you just saw the best of them. And there's some that are very, very similar in there because I'm like going, you know, maybe zooming in, focusing a little bit, and then one of the techniques is also just kind of getting your camera kind of in place, and you're just looking at that bird, and you're kind of crouched down, and you're just sitting here like this, waiting for it to look at you. And then you can even be like, if I was doing this, right, so that you can get it, you know, if its head is buried in those fish guts again, which is, you know, an interesting photograph, but I kind of want its iconic profile and that eye. That's the kind of photograph I want. So I'm kind of zoomed all the way in, looking at it, just watching it, and maybe taking occasionally a photograph to make sure everything's kind of like what I like. And then I'm all prepared. My camera's now in manual focus, so it's not gonna, if it turns, I don't have to wait for it to hunt to find, and bam, take that picture really quickly. So so I'm not going to show you all the rest, but there are, you know, probably half of the photographs I took are out of focus, just slightly out of focus as a bird kind of moves a little bit in and out. And then some of them, well, let's just see. Let's open up 75 of these here real quick here. Okay, so, you know, here's this bird flying overhead with fish guts dangling. So I have a bunch of photographs like this where I'm tracking this bird and I'm taking photographs, and there's times where the bird is a little bit out of the frame. In fact, I think I have a few where the bird isn't even in the picture at all. And these are beautiful photographs. Maybe not as beautiful as some of the other ones, but especially, you know, as the wings are flapping, there's no way to kind of take 5 photographs of this kind of situation and be able to walk away, right? Because you don't know until you get back onto computer how they turned out. Because they might look good on the back of your camera, and even if you're zooming in on the back of the camera, it's not until you get back home that you know, if you've got lots to choose from, you can find the one that you're most happy with. So, you know, I've got this bird here, but the horizon I kind of felt was a little bit too high. So you can see here's all these eagles landing. They kind of come around and do this kind of approach, and I think they're kind of scanning the beach to see if they could find the best food. And the other thing, it's important, what's nice about taking photographs of animals is it kind of forces you to slow down and to kind of just watch and wait and kind of observe them and to kind of see like what where are they going to go? Are they, if they're really anxious people and they run off, that makes your life a little bit difficult. But if they're somewhat socialized, which I imagine these birds are because they're right next to this old village, they probably see people all the time. They're not so jittery. So I was able to I would kind of walk a little bit towards them. Like, this is also kind of nice. Like, so look at this. This is beautiful with this one in nice sharp focus, and then these ones in behind that are out of focus. I think I would actually prefer this, like this image, than if all three of them had been in sharp focus. That's my personal opinion. And you can see them just gliding there. That's beautiful. Okay. So the reason I'm showing you all of this raw stuff as opposed to just showing you my portfolio of all the very best animal things I've ever shown before, because I don't know how helpful that would be. You know, I think it's more helpful because when I first started taking photographs, I just assumed that a good photographer takes perfect photographs every single time, and I would be thinking, how come half the photographs or more that I take are just garbage, right? Like, what's going on? Like, I must be just really, really bad. And the answer is that every photographer takes lots of photographs. And in the day and age where you have an SD card that, I have one of them here that is 256 gigabyte, you know, it's cost me like $200 or something. You know, that can take like probably 100,000 photographs, right? So now that takes a lot of time to edit and go through all those images. But, you know, if it was a really important thing and this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I wouldn't mind burning 1,000 of those photographs. And then if I can go through that and find the best 5 out of that, then that would make me really happy. Okay, so I'm going to kind of just transition away from that. If you have any questions about all of this, please let me know. And I just want to see. So just to kind of come back, kind of bullet points for taking pictures of birds and animals is a faster shutter speed is desirable, unless you want to capture some sense of movement. And maybe we'll talk about panning here in a second. Actually, I should find some images of pans that I have. We'll just open up. Let me see. Okay. Oh, okay, let's just... So what I'm sharing with you on the screen here is just a copy of the handout from one of my classes. I'm just going to make this nice and big so you can, if you're interested in reading it. So, generally we want to have a fast shutter speed when we're taking photographs of animals. But here's an example where, you know, let's say the wings of that eagle, if I really wanted it to look like it was flying fast, I would actually want the wings to be a little bit blurry, which would mean going to a slower shutter speed. And so, for instance, you know, this photograph of a dog running through the grass, like, look how fast this dog appears to be moving, right? It is moving no faster than any other dog that you've ever seen running in a yard or a park. But because of the way it's photographed, it looks like it is really going fast, right? So by using a slower shutter speed, we're able to sort of create the impression of fast speed, like this motorcycle. You know, it's not like, I mean, maybe it is moving fast, but it looks like it is really moving fast in this photograph because we're going a slightly slower shutter speed and then we're panning the camera. So I'll show you kind of how this is done. all that text up on the screen if you want to read it. But if a great thing to do is to practice taking photographs of cars. And do I have? So actually, I'll show you these photographs as well. So let's just take a look at these images. So here's some images of movement. Let's say, so what I'm doing is I took a picture of this guy standing at the bus stop, right? And then I switched my camera to manual focus. And how fast am I moving? This is 1/25 of a second, and I might have been on a tripod for this. I'm not sure. 1/25 of a second, f/22 ISO 100. So it's a relatively slow shutter speed. So this, what happens is as this bus passes by, it is going so fast that it becomes blurred, but we can still see, so I'll go back, this guy standing here, right? Like I can zoom all the way in, I can see the detail of here. This is looking right through the bus as if it's transparent, right? And there's dividers on all those windows that are just kind of disappeared because of the speed. Again, this is like a car driving by, and this is, yeah, I think the camera's on a tripod here. So here's cyclists who appear to be kind of blurring. Now what I'm using here is that panning technique to create the feeling of movement. So I think we're like 1/25, and this is a handheld photograph. And what I'm doing is a car comes by, and I just take a photograph of it in autofocus so that it focuses on that distance, right? So if you imagine this is a kind of, I'm perpendicular to a road that is, oh shoot, can't see me. So if you imagine like this is a road that's perpendicular to me, I'm standing on the sidewalk looking at the street and cars are driving by, right? So what I would do is I would just take a picture of a car as it drives right by my camera in autofocus, and then I'd switch my camera to manual focus. And then my shutter speed's a 1/125 of a second, right? And what I'm doing is then I watch as a car comes by, and then I take a picture and keep on going. So I'm just panning with the car, taking a picture. So as the car comes by, I capture it. And it's also important just to keep this movement, right? And just do this a whole bunch. You're going to get, and I think I'm just going to show you a bunch here. So you'll get, as the more you practice this, the better you get at it. But this is just a really neat way of blurring this space, right? So you see kind of the wheels turning. We see this person in the car. You know, definitely you're going to have maybe 1 in 10 photographs turn out in the way that makes you happy. But it is really satisfying because now this car looks like it is, you know, on the run, right? It's a bank robber, you know, trying to get away, right? And eventually you start getting some like this. Now, right, I can get, you know, I see the fingerprints on this car, right? It's not perfectly in focus, but that's not the point of being nice, sharp focus. It's about trying to convey the sense of movement. So panning, this is a really fun thing to do if you've got like a dog, and you take your dog to a park. Oh, shoot. I didn't show those photographs. Let me do that again here. Sorry. I'm talking while you're just sitting here like, what is he talking about? So yeah, let's say 1 in 10 photographs that you take like this are going to turn out, but that's pretty good. So you're going to waste a lot of space, but you're learning and you're getting the technique down, right? So you get the kind of the wheels look like they're just, you know, a blur, and you start getting these kind of like the leaves start to looking like they're these straight lines, and you know, like here's this one where look how nice and sharp up here is. You see the fingerprints on this guy's door. So I would really strongly encourage you to play around with taking some photographs like that. And if you have a little dog and you try doing this with your dog running through like a dog park, and you make your 10-year-old tired dog look like it is racing through the grass, it'll touch your heart, right? It'll make that dog look like it's young again, right? And I always think one of the roles of a photographer is to make everybody look their best. You want everybody to look good in your pictures. So you don't want to take a picture of somebody and them to feel like, oh man, that's like, yeah, I guess you can put that up on the web, like that's really not the most flattering photograph. Like it doesn't make anybody feel good. And same thing, your dog can't speak, but it's so much nicer to put an image of your pet, your cat, right, your goldfish out there that makes that creature shine, and everybody is like, oh wow, like what a beautiful animal, look how fast it's running, right? So lastly, I just kind of talked briefly about this concept a little bit. I didn't use this name, but this idea here, the decisive moment. When I was talking about getting crouched down and we're looking at an eagle and I'm just waiting for it to look at me in this particular moment, right? That idea was sort of established or popularized by a French photographer, Henri Cartier-Bresson, who's like probably one of the most famous photographers of all time, known for this idea of the decisive moment. And this is one of his famous photographs here, where there's this guy you can see there's this puddle. Who knows how deep this puddle is? Is the guy going to fall in through? He's about to step into the puddle. Is he going to go all the way up to his shoulders, or is it just going to make a little splash and it barely covers the heel of his shoe? We don't know. But the way this photograph was taken is Cartier-Bresson is standing there with his camera, just watching, maybe there's people coming and going, right? And on their way to work, and he's got his tripod, and he's figured out all of his camera settings. He knows the focus he wants. And then the water becomes glass still, right? All the crowds have left, and he's just waiting for somebody to walk over that little ladder and then hit the water and create a big splash, right? So, this is, if you're a wildlife photographer, this is a situation you want to become familiar with, right? You find a bird's nest and there's no birds there, right? Or maybe there's little eggs in there. Then you set your camera up, and maybe you set your camera up inside the house looking through the window, and you've taken a whole bunch of photographs, so you're happy with the way the glare is not interfering with the image, and you just wait until the mommy bird flies down with a squirming worm coming out of its mouth, and all the birds are like looking up and trying to take a bite, right? And then boom, you take a photograph, or you take 10 of them, or however. But the same if you're sitting at a coffee shop in Paris and you're like, you know what, I want a photograph of some guy in a red beret with a poodle and a baguette under their arm, right? Well, and you just want the most cliched photograph of all time, and there's, I don't know, some kind, I don't know what kind of, the Eiffel Tower in the background, right? So you just set up and you're just waiting for somebody like that to move through. Or maybe you don't get everything you want, but maybe you find something totally different. Somebody walks by in a big pink fur jacket and on a motorcycle, and you're like, whoa, that is crazy. Boom, you're set up. You weren't expecting this, but now you've got a totally different photograph that is equally as cool. So, I think, oh, you know, I do want to kind of quickly talk about some lights here, just to kind of, and then we'll end the class. So I know we're running a little, I thought today I was going to today's going to be one of the shorter ones. It'll be like 45 minutes long, and here I'm at like an hour and a half, an hour and 20 or so. Okay. So I want to kind of just briefly talk a little bit about lighting. And when we're talking about taking faster shutter speed photographs, then what you want is light. What you need is light. If you ever watch a sporting event and they go in, even in day games, right? You go to a baseball stadium and they're playing in the middle, like you'll look around and you will see the lights on. And if you go to like the Olympics, or I've never been to the Summer Olympics, but if you watch the video feed of like the finish line, you'll see a big bank of lights there, right? And you're like, why are there so many lights here on a bright day? It's probably for the photographers and the videographers who are right there, and they're taking photos. You know, you saw my shutter speed there was 1/13,000th of a second, right? Some of those photographers are taking photographs much faster, at like 1/100th of a second fast, right? To capture that decisive moment when an athlete crosses the finish line, right? And they want to be able to make sure, you know, they're trying to find the Guinness records and were they there 1/100th of a second, whatever, right? Or it's really close and who crossed the finish line first. So they're blaring all of this light onto that space so they can have those really, really fast shutter speeds. Because again, a fast shutter speed means there's very little light that makes its way through that opening onto the camera sensor. So you want some lights. Now, this is a cheap light I just bought. For the studio here, and I just got this here in Vancouver from Canadian Tire department store. I think this was like $14, $16 or so, right? So just a cheap little desk lamp. But this is really helpful for taking photographs like in your house or your studio. Now, I've kind of modified this a little bit, and I'm just going to show you what I've done. I also have a light bulb in here, and this is a Wi-Fi enabled light bulb. So I'm just going to turn the lights down here. So right now I've got it set to, I'm going to turn another light off here. So what's kind of cool about this particular light is I can adjust things like its color. Right, so, and I just have a little app on my phone here, and I'm just dialing the colors around. And you know what, maybe I'm just gonna make a little split screen here of this. I guess it won't let me do that, so don't worry about that then. Or will this have a focus? Okay, camera not happy with me. So this will allow me to kind of, with this app, I can kind of change the colors. And maybe I'll just point this down here, right? So I can dial it into the. And so this would allows me to kind of really play with color temperature, which I think this is, we go in color temperature from, again, it's a little bit too bright, but blue, kind of a cool light, and as I go over here to a warmer light. So you can even just see my hand. Move this. How the kind of the light kind of affects, you know. So you can see as we get into this kind of bluer light, it looks like, it reminds me of like a hospital room. You know, it's just like kind of green and not particularly the most flattering. As I come back towards the white, or towards, it goes white, and then it goes back to kind of orange yellow. So this kind of, you know, reading lamp next to your bed kind of color, which is generally more flattering. So and that light bulb I think is like $15, you know, so we're not talking like a major. So for $30 you can get a light with a light bulb that you can use in your house. And in fact, these lights here also have this light bulb, this type of light bulb in there too, so that if I want the color temperature on the camera to be a little bit different, I can modify that as well. So having a little lamp, you know, $15, even if you just have a regular light bulb and you want to brighten up a scene, is really helpful. Now, I do have some other lights, but this is kind of the cheapest one I have. This is this brand Newer, Newer. I'll put that down in the show notes. CN216, and it takes these big batteries that are most commonly found in like Sony video cameras. So they're like super. You may even, if you have an old video camera, you could bring out these batteries and you can use them. And just a very simple little dial on the side, and then it comes with kind of a few little screens for different color temperatures. They're the more expensive ones. I have another one here that has a little dial on the side that, just like that app that I was showing you, can change the color from a cool to a warm color. And so that's just, it's nice to have that that level of versatility where you can kind of vary, because if you have different light bulbs from different, and you're just kind of putting them in your house into different light fixtures, and each of those light bulbs is going to emit a slightly different color. And next class we're going to talk about color temperature and the white balance of your camera. And if you have a bunch of different lights, they're giving off different colors, and then it can be a real tricky thing. You might be taking photographs, and the white balance in your camera can really struggle. And so that's why next week we'll talk about how you can set the color temperature exactly the way you want it, so that you're not, because sometimes if you've ever taken a photograph and you're like, whoa, why is everything greenish or blue, or what's going on? It's usually your white balance on your camera is a little bit off. So I'll show you how to fix that. But anyway, this one just has is kind of a generic kind of orange that'll help kind of give you that warmer golden hour kind of look. So when I'm doing portrait photography, I have 3 lights like this, and I've set them up like I've taken photographs of musicians doing like rehearsals, or the sound check before they go on stage. And so before the crowd is there, I can bring a bunch of lights, set them up right on the stage, and get the lighting how I want it, and take a whole bunch of quick photographs that look like the concert kind of thing, right? So so these are super handy because they're battery powered. I have a few that are that need an extension cord. Actually, that one also takes batteries as well, but it can be plugged in. So and I would suggest having this light stand is also like, I don't know how much it costs, like $10 or something. Light stands for some reason are cheaper than your tripod for your camera, even though this is technically a tripod. It's got 3 legs, but it when it folds it down like this, this is the entire extent that it folds down. Like this, the light comes off the top, but I have like a duffel bag that this fits in, and I've got that all of these fit in. So this is not the kind of thing you would go backpacking around Europe carrying this big thing around with you, right? When you know you've got the Gorilla Pod or some kind of much smaller tripod that is more versatile. So I don't have time to really show you how to light a scene. That's a kind of, I used to teach like a part 2 to this class, and maybe I'll do a part 2 to this class where we go really into like portrait photography and lighting for different situations. So I'll think about it. If that's something you're really interested in and you'd like me to do that, send me some encouragement in the comments section, and maybe I'll continue the course, or take a little. I need to take a little bit of a break because I'm renovating this whole studio right now. You can't see all the debris everywhere except maybe some tools surrounding me. It's a bit chaotic, but if that's something you're interested in, maybe I'll take a break and come back and we'll do a new series of classes. Okay, so I'm just going to throw up a graphic here on the screen because I think we're at an hour and a half, and for those of you who would like to leave us for today, you're welcome to do so. And so for next class, what I encourage you to do is to really play with the fast shutter or fast shutter speeds on your camera. So taking photographs of birds, of cats, of fish. Go down to, if you have any water nearby, a lake or a river or an ocean, try and take pictures of like the waves coming in and splashing of water. Try taking photographs of the rain outside of your window, and so you can see the streaks of rain coming down, or the water hitting puddles and kind of bursting. So many things you can do with fast shutter speeds. So kind of the opposite of what we did last class with those kind of long extended shots for light trails of cars and stars, etc. Try also then experimenting with panning your camera while you're taking photographs. You know, go down to a busier street. You know, people are going to give you a little bit of funny looks if you're taking pictures of their cars driving by. It's just something if that makes you stressed out, then put out a little bit longer lens and stand a little bit further back, and or find an angle where you're not so noticeable. I mean, people aren't going to pull over and come running at you and chase you down but you can also do the same sort of thing with people walking on the street. I'm trying to think of how other types of ways you could do a pan image. But just try experimenting with it. Even if a family member walking around, you know, if you just sit on the balcony and you watch them kind of running around or something, then I would suggest either looking around your house and seeing if you have an old lamp in the basement, you could bring it out and use that to set up a little bit of a station to do some still life photography. Or consider ordering something or buying something inexpensive that you can use to take some faster shutter speed indoors. And then just keeping an eye open for magazines on the web, anything that's showing these fast exposures where you see action frozen in time. Right, so that you see somebody jumping up in the air, a basketball player slamming a basketball into the hoop, and they're like the famous Michael Jordan photograph that was subsequently used for his logo, since people are talking about that documentary of his, The Last Dance, on right now. You know, if you think about, like, there's an iconic photo of him dunking that he turned into the logo that's on all his shoes and everything, right? And that would have been a very fast shutter speed. So if you're doing any kind of sports, you want fast shutter speeds generally, unless you want to make it, you get that panning look of somebody zipping by the boards or running down the field. If you have little kids and you want them to look like they are like running faster than Usain Bolt, try doing that panning with just like 1/25, 1/30 speed. Okay, and also if you've enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. I'm also on Facebook. There's a Facebook event for these things, and that might be a good way to kind of keep in touch while I take a little bit of time to reset and rebuild the studio here. And there's also, I'm teaching a drawing class, which will continue. There'll be a part 2 of that that'll continue for the next month as well. But that happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'm going to take a look at some photographs. Oh, Yannick asked, where can I get prints made in Vancouver? I did put, when would it have been in the... Okay, I'm just going to bring this up here on the screen in a second. You're asking about where can I get images printed. Let's drag this into position. So this is kind of for people in Vancouver, but some of this will apply elsewhere. So on the top there is just information about renting photo equipment and lenses, which again, I would say is a good idea to do if you're thinking about trying a new lens, but you're like, I don't know if I want to spend $200 or $1,000 on a new lens. So, renting a lens for a weekend for $20, $30, and then if you don't like it, then you're not stuck with it. Of course, you could also try buying something and returning it, but depending on the place you go to, they could give you a hard time, or they may only give you an exchange instead of a full refund. When it comes to printing and framing photographs, if you're thinking about framing a photograph, the best thing to do is buy the frame first. The most common frame sizes are 8 by 10 inches or 8.5 by 11. A little bit less common. This is if you print 8.5 by 11, which is a regular paper size here in North America. The kind of frames you're looking for are like for diplomas or degrees, that kind of stuff. Certificates of authenticity, all that kind of, your business license. But so they're not as common as 8 by 10. And then if you want to print photographs, here's, you got London Drugs here in Vancouver, or throughout most of Canada, I think, Shoppers Drug Mart. Costco, I've heard, is the cheapest place to develop photos. I think they're like London Drugs for 8 by 10, I think is $6, 6 to 8 or something around there. Whereas Costco, it was like $2.50 or some crazy deal. Walmart as well, I can't remember how much they are. There are other places if you're really interested in blowing up and getting really, really nice photographs. Here in Vancouver, there is, just escapes me. They're like 2 or 3 blocks away from where we live. ABC Photo, which I've used for printing stuff for my own exhibitions, art shows and stuff. But they're more expensive, but super custom. I mean, they sell lenses that are, or not lenses, they sell the prints. I mean, they can print on anything, basically. They can print on canvas, on like rice paper, on plastic, on metal, glass, like plexiglass, you name it. So if you want to do something really unique, and I've had some people go there for my classes and get stuff printed, and they said that the price was actually really competitive. So, I mean, they just, when you go there, they'll say, what do you want to print it on? They literally give you a binder with like 200 different types of material to print on. So if you find that a little overwhelming to make a decision like that, I mean, they have very great staff there that will recommend what to get if you're in a real pinch. But if you go to some place like London Drugs or Costco, they just basically tell you what size do you want and what do you want it, glossy or matte. And they have different names for, I think London Drugs calls it pearl, and they don't, not glossy. Anyway, they have names, but if you have problems any place, just talk to the staff and they'll come over and help you. You can also upload most of your photographs through the web and just go there and pick it up. So especially in these crazy times, if you don't want to sit around in a photo place talking to somebody and going through all the options using their computers, you can do it from the safety of your own home, upload it, make all the decisions, and just show up and pick it up and pay and leave, right? Just keep in mind, sometimes when you do it online, it can take a little bit longer than if you go there to do it in person. So that's just something I've noticed. So Amy was talking London Drugs and ABC Photo. Ebony User says, classes are very helpful. Part 2 sounds great. He asked what Henry's on Broadway. I don't think they do prints. I've bought in camera stuff there. But I don't know if they print things. They're fantastic. I often go down there and just kind of look and browse around at the equipment, and they're really nice about letting you try different stuff. They certainly have more selection than most other photo places in Vancouver anyway. And I think they're across Canada. So I think they're in Toronto and Calgary and etc. I don't think they're I think they're a Canadian company, so not in the States. But I would say get to know your local camera shop. And they're really, like, customer service when it comes to a camera is really helpful. Like, you know, as much as those big box stores, Best Buy and whatever, you know, are great for some deals, going to a local camera shop where everybody there is a photographer. Like, they are there because they get to use some of the equipment off hours, and on the weekend they can take some of the models that are in the display cabinets home and use them. So they know how the cameras work, and they have no bones telling you about, like, because before I jumped to Fuji, I was not looking at Fuji, and I was like, I'm thinking of getting into a mirrorless camera. I was thinking of getting the new Canon camera, and one of the salesmen he's like, don't go for the Canon, check out the Fuji. And I was like, I don't know, I've had some of my students use them, and they look like weird things, and they were just like, and once they heard me talking about the Fuji, they all kind of swarmed. They're like, no, try it, this is amazing. And then I went home and did some more research and came back like a week later and bought a Fuji XT3, which is like the most amazing camera I've ever owned. Yeah, so go to your local camera store, chat them up, and ask them questions. You know, I can do my best to kind of answer your questions over the web here with you, but they would be people that I would talk to. Okay, so I think there's just one set of photographs that were sent to me, so I'm just going to bring them up onto the screen, and we'll talk about them. So these ones Yannick sent in. So, oops. And I think this is the order that you sent them. This is beautiful. Look at that sky. So what I like about this is you really, the composition here is very, in terms of like the rule of thirds, is very dramatic, right? You've literally cut the tops of you've just got the roofs of houses, you know, I don't know if those are chimneys or buildings in the back. There's some buildings, some of them might be chimneys too. And then some trees and a little bit of a hill, but then most part is focused on those clouds, and those clouds are fierce. Like, I love this orangey reddish cloud coming across here, and then these streaks coming out this way. So, and then obviously, oops, where are we here? And then this beautiful, you know, fiery sunset, orange on the bottom. I think that is really beautiful. So I think this is a great photo. I mean, I would say what kind of comment can I give on this? I think maybe it might be nice to see a little bit more of some of these houses down here. But I also appreciate the artistic choice to really focus purely on the sky. Like, I think that is really nice to see, because I think not everybody would allow themselves this kind of such an extreme cropping of your photograph. So kudos, that's great. And there's just so much going on. Like, even though this is really kind of blurry, you know, our eyes kind of move up here. I think it's because everything here is really nice and sharp. We have nice sharp trees and cables and buildings. That when we come up here, this is so kind of blurry, and I don't think that's an error in any way. It's just the softness of those clouds, right? And so it's just kind of satisfying is those contrasts. Always contrast, contrast, contrast is always so nice to see when there's contrasts of light and dark, contrasts of color, contrasts of texture, contrasts of size, and so on and so on and so on, right? So just being mindful that the more contrasts you put into an image, I think the more captivating it is for people, and the longer that they're going to want to look at your pictures. Now, I think this was the next one in here, and this is crossing the Canby Bridge, I think you said. And this is really cool. Like, so obviously we have these light trails of cars. This looks like maybe the car's going this way, and I don't know what this might be. Kind of light reflecting off a car's tire or something, but that creates a really strange look of this kind of jittery movement here. You know, one of the weird things about taking these light trail photographs is sometimes they look so odd that they kind of, to somebody who's not really looking for it, they may even not even know that those were cars coming by. Like, they might just think there's some red neon lighting on this bridge now. So that's why it can be helpful for the lights, rather than just kind of going straight across, for them to kind of end at some point. That's also what's nice about being, if you can get to a place like where there's a median where you can stand in between, you can see stuff coming and going, and you have cars of different heights. So if you had, like, this car, you know, might be in this lane with this kind of street coming through, but let's say we had another one coming down right along next to the railing, then we might have 2 or 3 different kind of heights of those red bands, and then it starts to look a little bit strange, because this red looks like it could be on the other side or on the median, whereas if we had one going right down the middle of the road right here, it would look like, well, that's not possible, right? That's great photo. And then here's another angle, I think, on the bridge as well, same bridge, and now we're looking at cars coming towards us and then speeding by. So, the best places to do this kind of thing are generally where there's the most traffic. So just kind of keeping an eye out, you know, next time, you know, after sun goes down and you're driving home from a movie, or after dropping the kids off at a babysitter or whatever, you know, just in your mind thinking, like, what is a busy street corner that maybe not now, but maybe 2 months from now I could come back and I'm like, oh, I always remember that night when we left the, you know, fast food joint with the whatever. Like, that's a good place I should come back to. I bet you I could take some cool photographs from there. So you're always storing ideas in the back of your mind to use later on. So that if you wanted just for fun, or you're thinking about doing this for a photo shoot, you've in the back of your mind thinking, like, because this could be a really cool location to, let's say, you had a model or some musicians, and they're leaning up against this railing, you know, they're sitting on the railing as cars are driving by, and you just say to them like, okay, we're going to do a 13-second long exposure, so I need you to be super still, and we're going to try to get some cars streaking by and behind you, right? So they're just kind of sitting there smiling, and then cars drive by and create this weird effect, and you might see even strange things like their hair flies up and creates, you know, so, and maybe they have a sparkler in one hand, you know, all the different kinds of crazy things that you could do. Speaking of which, the last photograph that we'll look at today, I think, is another one that you did while walking across the bridge, and this is fantastic. So this is a long exposure, but you're hand holding it as you're walking. So all of this weird jittery stuff is, you know, if this might have been exactly like one of the previous photos like this, but because you're walking, we get all these crazy light trails that are created just from the lampposts, maybe cars driving by. And now this looks like we're at a carnival or something, right? If you had told me that you took this at like a state fair, and this is like a you know, merry-go-round, and there's a, you know, Ferris wheel or whatever, I'd say, yeah, sure, that's entirely possible. And yet this is something you just took on a bridge in the middle of the night, right? So I think that once you start thinking about like how I can start playing with my camera and different shutter speeds to let more or less light in, and then you can, you know, you could use this for all sorts of different kinds of, I mean, you can do something similar in video, and that would also create like a really strange kind of look, right? It would look like, you know, if you wanted to, if this was like a James Bond movie and James Bond's been poisoned and he's stumbling around trying to make it back to, you know, some good guy headquarters or something, right? You would expect to see this kind of thing on camera from his point of view. So just once you start using your camera, playing around with all these exciting kind of settings, it starts kind of, you think like, oh, I could take this kind of photograph, and then that could kind of stand in for somebody's emotional state or the interiority of their mind, right? That we don't normally have access to, but we can use images to convey those kind of experiences. Okay, so I think I've exhausted everybody at this point. Oh, and so, I don't know, Ebenezer, if you're saying that Henry's prints photos now, I didn't. If that's what you're saying, that would be really cool. That if they did that, I'd be really interested to see what their prices and stuff are. I imagine they're probably fairly reasonable. They got to be competitive, considering they're right next door to the London Drugs. So, okay. So for next class, taking some photographs with faster shutter speeds. Try doing some panning. It's a little bit tricky. So just like we were doing star photos, half of them aren't going to turn out just right off the top. So the more photographs you take, the better your chances are to get something that you are going to be happy with. And if you have any that you like, send them to me for feedback. If you have any that really didn't turn out and you can't figure out what's going on, send those to me too, and then we'll we can always have a great conversation, just I think as we've had so far. Okay, everybody. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, depending, or morning, wherever you are here on our beautiful planet. Please like, subscribe. If you want to make a small donation via PayPal, link is in the description below. Otherwise, we'll see you on Wednesday, same time, same place. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.